Let's do a quick recap of what we learned about Dynamic SQL before we show you another way to do it. First, let's look at all of the records of the employee table. Now, how do we do this equivalent query in the most simple form of Dynamic SQL? Well, we'll declare a variable of nvarchar and we'll call it 200. And in single quotes, we'll put that query in there. Then we'll call the exec statement and pass in that nvarchar. This will get us the exact same records. There's another way to do this. You can call on the system stored procedure sp_execute SQL. At first, it's going to appear to do the same thing and be just a bit more typing. But we're going to show you the advantages pretty soon. Let's start off with a side-by-side comparison. Let's declare a variable named @SPSQL of an nvarchar 200, and we're going to give it the same dynamic string of select star from employee. And this time when we execute, we're going to call on the sp_execute SQL stored procedure, and we're going to pass it the string that represents the query, which is the @SPSQL variable. Run it, and again you get all the records of the employee table. Okay, here's a query that shows all of the last names of Smith at our company. And sometimes we want to see the last name of Brown, sometimes we want to see the last name of Adams. So hard-coding this Smith is not what we want. We're going to put @emplastname as a variable. Now, if we declare this variable and set it, we can change the way this query runs just by changing the value of the variable. We can put this entire query in a set of single quotes, and that'll make it Dynamic SQL if we declare an @SQL variable as an nvarchar 200 and set it to be equal to this entire string. When we execute this as Dynamic SQL, it's going to say, you haven't declared @emplastname. Well, let's declare the @emplastname variable as an nvarchar 30. Our goal is to execute this Dynamic SQL, but somehow, when it gets executed, it needs to swap out the @emplastname variable for whatever the value is set to. So here's some syntax that's close, but not quite ready to work. And that is, we're going to say the @emplastname variable is equal to Smith. Let's run this. It says incorrect syntax. You see, with the execute statement, you can only execute the concatenated string. You can't swap out any variables in real time. However, if you use the sp_execute SQL system stored procedure, you can actually swap out dynamic parameters right before execution. So this query should look familiar to you. Here we've declared the @SQL variable and we've set it to a query that actually needs a parameter replaced with an actual value before it runs. Let's call on the execute sp_execute SQL stored procedure, and let's pass it the SQL statement, and let's say that we have the @emplastname, which is an nvarchar 50. Well, what value will that be? Gee, we're probably going to have to declare @emplastname and set it. Well, stored procedures know that when you're passing stuff in, it's being declared. So all we need to do is say @emplastname equals Smith. See, the declaration is a part of the parameter being passed into the stored procedure. So we're just going to set the value as the last parameter. In running it, the result set shows Smith. How about we change the variable value to Adams? We get Adams in the result set. How about Brown? Now we see Brown in the result set. Here's a familiar query that goes way back to the first Joe's to Pros book, where we use the between keyword to find a range of values. Here, this will find all the grants between 15,000 and 25,000. If we change the @min variable to 20,000, we won't get as many grants. We're going to find everything between 20,000 and 25,000. We want to turn this select statement with these two variables into Dynamic SQL and be able to pass in two variables at once to it. Well, the sp_execute SQL stored procedure can handle a lot of variables. So let's see what it looks like if we just declare the @SQL string, or the set of characters, as an nvarchar 200, and we set it to this exact same query. Now, let's call on the execute sp_execute SQL and pass in the SQL variable nvarchar. we need to pass in the @min parameter and the @max parameter, and we're going to set them to 15 and 25,000. Before the single quotes, we're going to put an N for Unicode, and inside the single quotes, we're going to put @min as a money type and max as a money data type. Now we're going to just simply set @min to be equal to 15,000 and the @max to be equal to 25,000. Let's run this. Those are the 6 records that are between 15 and 25,000. How about the 2 records that are between 20 and 25,000? Just simply change your variable values and the SP_execute SQL stored procedure adapts to the new Dynamic SQL and its values. Lab 3.2, Skill Check 1. Turn this query into Dynamic SQL that runs from the SP_execute SQL stored procedure. The body of the code should be in the @SQL variable, and the code you pass into the SP_execute SQL stored procedure should be called @ClassTime. When you're done, your results should resemble the figure you see here. Skill Check 2. Turn this query into Dynamic SQL that runs from the SP_execute SQL. The body of the code should be in the @SQL variable, and the 2 parameters you pass into the SP_execute SQL stored procedure should be called @mgrid and @pay. When you're done, your results should resemble the figure you see here.